Hey everybody, welcome to the RFP Success Show. I'm your host, Lisa Rehurek, founder and CEO of the RFP Success Company. And we are back again with part 2 of my interview with Samantha Enslen, president of Dragonfly Editorial and proposal content guru. Samantha, welcome back.
Welcome, Lisa. So great to be here.
So last time we kind of left off talking about readability. And I love the conversation about readability because of course that's what it's all about, right? Can they can they follow along easily, concisely, in order to score you appropriately, right? That's what we're trying to do is give them the information that they
Yeah.
need in order to get the score you deserve.
Mhm.
So one of the tools that we've talked about that I learned about from you in all my time in proposals, I never knew this existed, is that function in Word, that readability function in Word. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, there are well, first of all, let me back up and say there's a concept of something called readability meters. And these are something that have been, gosh, they were developed probably in the 1960s and forward from there. And they're designed to analyze a piece of text and tell you how readable it is. Is it easy to read? Is it hard to read, et cetera? And there's different types of them. The two that are probably most commonly used, one is called the Fleisch-Kincaid grade level readability meter. And it can score it analyzes a piece of text and it assigns it a grade level readability. So something might come back at 3rd grade readability, 12th grade readability, and it just kind of goes up from there. So you could you could send in something really complex and it would come back with like a 30th grade level readability, which obviously doesn't really exist, but that tells you like, oh my gosh, this piece of material is really hard to read. There's also another one called the Fleisch readability. What is it called? The Fleisch readability ease scale. So you can tell there's a guy named Fleisch who invented these.
Right.
And it does the same thing. It analyzes text, and that one comes back on a scale of 1 to 100.
Oh,
On the Fleisch reading ease score, just to make things confusing, a higher score is better.
oh,
So
interesting.
the higher score you are on the Fleisch reading ease, the better. Whereas on the Fleisch-Kincaid, the lower you are, the better. So a little bit of a mind bender there.
Yeah, that's good.
But
That's good
point
background.
being, both of those measurements are built into Microsoft Word, as well as some other key ways you can judge readability, which is the percent of passive voice in a document and the number of words per sentence. Needless to say, the lower your percent of passive voice is, the higher your readability is. Not because passive voice is bad necessarily, but it is often an indicator of overly complex sentence structures, things that could be said more directly, more plainly. Passive voice is just kind of like can be a signal that we're not speaking as or writing as plainly as we could.
That's great feedback.
And sentence length, again, is an indicator. Not that it's horrible or a sin to have a long sentence, but a long, showing an average of lots of long sentences in your proposals. If you have an average of, say, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 word long sentences, that's going to be a big signal that your proposal is not as easy to read, as easy to access. Because again, what some studies have shown is that for readers, once they get past about 14, 15 words in a sentence, they don't just like keep plowing through like, I'm determined to read and understand this sentence. They basically just literally stop reading.
Oh my gosh.
And
I
skip
would
to the
do
next
that.
sentence.
Yeah. For sure.
And it's like a sliding scale. After 14 words, they pretty much hang with you for about 14 words, and then they drop off faster and faster the longer your sentence gets after that.
Interesting.
So point being, these 4 key measures of readability, the 2 Fleisch scales, passive voice, percent of passive voice, and number of words per sentence, are all available through the, if you enable the readability metrics in your Microsoft Word. I won't describe how to do it right here, Lisa, but it's in your settings.
Yeah, and you can
in
Google
Word,
it.
let's just
That's
put it that way.
Yeah, and I just Googled it and I figured it out. It's super easy to do, but it's
Yeah.
probably not natively just in there. You've got to activate it.
You do have to activate it, yes. And it will, once you activate it, every time you run spell check, or I think what they call like review in the newer versions of Word, your metrics, once you go through the whole review and are like, yep, that's fine, no, that's not fine, with all their suggestions, the readability metrics will pop up after that.
Got it.
This is also goes back in our last episode, we were talking a lot about how to convince technical folks to write a little bit more concisely. Hello, we can actually give them hard numbers with this now, which is probably music to their ears. If you're like, yeah, your section's a little too long, they might not care. But if we can come back and say, hey, we're showing that readability for this section is at this level, and we really want it to be at this level, well, then all of a sudden now we have data to define what we're talking about. And that it's a more objective measurement.
Yeah, and a lot of technical people really love that proof, right?
Yeah.
So, but that brings up a good point, because I'd love your opinion on this. I know that I've talked to technical people before, and I'm like, you want to be writing to, maybe a 6th grade level or a 8th grade level, and they think I'm nuts, because they, of course, come from very highly technical fields where they, the intelligence factor is very important. And so to get them to comprehend that it's better to be writing to a lower grade level, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And from that perspective, it's kind of unfortunate that the Fleisch-Kincaid grade level readability score is used so frequently, because it doesn't make sense to people a lot when you say, oh yeah, we should write for a 7th grade level, and they're like, well, our readers aren't 7th graders, they're it's not really it's not exactly an indication. It's not at all an indication that 7th graders would be reading this. The thing I try to tell people is that when we're submitting content for people, the smarter they are, the higher up they are in an organization, the less time they're going to have in their schedule. A C-suite reader or somebody who's a high-level evaluator, they got to that because they're very successful people. They don't have a bunch of time to waste reading our content. So, so we have to make our material particularly easy to read, quick to get in, get out, get the information, and leave. So that's the point of these readability meters, is helping people get in and out of the content quickly. It's not really about dumbing down the content. And highly sophisticated material is written at a 7th or 9th grade level. Well,
that's crazy.
Yeah, you would never know. It doesn't have to do with using simplistic words like, cat, dog, birdie. It's really it's about cutting out unnecessarily long words in your text. Like, why say accordingly? You can just say so, for example, or the famous or not at all, right? Or the famous utilize instead of use. When we're in our content, we often have to convey complex technical messages and use terms of art to our industry. We can't strip those out. Plain language or readability is not stripping out the truly important technical content. It's about making all the language around that simpler, concise, easier to get through. in a way, it's actually helping their technical content stand out. It's not weighing their technical content down with all this other muck around it.
And it's interesting too, because I found recently, and I don't know if this is a new word update or it's because I added that readability function in, but I love how it blue underlines when I'm using too many words. If I'm using like 3 words instead of, and I can't even think of the one that I do a lot, I'm starting to see my own habits. And the replacement word is must.
Yeah.
But instead I use three words, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense 98% of the time, 99% of the time. And so it's starting to train me a little bit. I think that's another great thing about those features, is it starts to train us a little bit more, wouldn't you say?
I agree. Now, Word or any other software like that is, at the end of the day, only a machine. And so
Right.
some of the suggestions that it gives me, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
But we get to choose which ones we want to accept. But I agree with you, some of the suggestions that Word is now starting to make, where it's pointing out areas where you're being redundant or using too many words, can be really valuable.
Yeah. So you said something a couple minutes ago that I wanted to address, because this is how I always combat the argument if people say, well, I don't want to write to a 6th grade level. And I always kind of throw out that a good portion of the major publications out there write to, a 6th grade level or somewhere in that vicinity. And you mentioned that some of the more complex ones even write to 8th or 9th grade. Is that what you said? Do you have any specific examples of?
Gosh,
Putting you on the spot.
I know, I don't off the top of my head, but I did a readability study once on a bunch of different books, things like Pride and Prejudice, for example, which you would think like that's a sophisticated literary gem of our age, is written at a 7th grade level.
Wow.
For example.
Okay.
Or other books like that, like Carl Sagan's Cosmos, again, which is literally explaining how the entire universe works, I think is written at a 9th grade level. So there's lots of examples like that of people presenting very complex content, but if you actually look at the readability, it's surprisingly low.
That's great. I love that conversation, because I think, again, readability is key, right? That's a huge piece of what we're doing here. All right, another question for you. 1st person, 3rd person, when and where? I get this question all the time, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not really great at answering it. So looking for your brilliance, Samantha.
Well, here's my 2 cents. And again, I'll jump back to the new ISO standards that are coming out on plain language. And one of their recommendations is, whenever possible, address the reader directly.
Okay.
So that's speaking in 1st person.
Yep.
So we're submitting our proposal. Here's what we can do for you. Here's how we will help solve your problems. So it's a 1st person, a real human speaking to another human or set of humans. So generally speaking, that's my recommendation. Okay. You may know in your particular situation that that's not quite the right fit, and that's okay. The other thing I will say about that is, contrary to what you were taught in 5th grade or whatever, I think it's okay in our proposals to jump back and forth between 1st person and 3rd person.
Ooh, I was just going to ask that.
So we could say, so let's say I'm doing one of my proposals, for example, I'll say, here's what we are offering you. We are going to bring you X, Y, and Z writing services. And then all of a sudden we have to answer sort of an about section. Then I switch into 3rd person. Dragonfly was formed in 2005, blah, blah, blah. To me, it does not cause a dissonance to go between 1st and 3rd in proposals. Somebody who is like a strict copy editor will get all agitated about that. I think it's perfectly fine.
Well, especially from section to section, right? I mean, if you're mixing it up in one paragraph, that's going to be a little bit weird, but
yeah.
I like the way that you described that. That's perfect. We get that question a lot, and I'm very much of a 1st person type That's my recommendation too, because I feel like it makes it more personal. It allows you to connect better, which builds some trust, and there's an emotion that is evoked there versus, and I don't know, maybe I'm aging myself here, but I feel like that's not how we were taught to write when I was young. I mean, certainly when I was young, it was very buttoned up and professional and very third person, but I think people are craving that first person connection more and more these days.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's how all of us were taught somehow, that business language is supposed to be very formal and third person. That's certainly how, like the scientific and medical community writes in their medical journals, for example, because we edit some of that content. It's not like we learned this, we found this, here's what we discovered. It's all kind of a weird third person account of what the findings were and what the discoveries were.
But
that's how it's done there.
Yeah. Seems more appropriate for something like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make in their writing, particularly when we're talking about proposals?
Gosh, that's a big question, Lisa.
Like, how much time do we have, right? I know.
I do think that one of them can be being overly formal. Sometimes people writing the way they think a proposal is supposed to sound or a business document is supposed to sound, rather than writing in a more natural, conversational way.
It's like they follow suit from the RFP questions, right? And then they go into the same kind of buttoned up. Yeah. I find that too.
Yeah. That's not to say that our proposals should be like, yo, dude, buy our stuff. But that we can still write in a little bit more natural way. I think what we talked about earlier, the tendency to add too much detail, too much information that's not really relevant to the reader or is showing the reader how we bring value or something different or unique that we're going to bring. But we're just like, oh, let's throw this in just as an FYI. Those are two of the bigger things that I see. Oh, and I guess the one biggie that I do find other proposal managers complain about a lot is people not answering the question.
Always. It's crazy to me. And we tell people that and they're like, oh no, we answer the question and then we'll do a review of their proposals, and they're not answering it. And I've got gobs of examples, or they answer part of it. But, sometimes, especially in government proposals, they'll ask like 6 questions in one. And, it's a little bit hard to keep track of that sometimes. So, yeah. The other one that I find too is that they're too me focused and not enough focus. Kind of goes to the second one that you talked about, but not enough focused on the solution at hand and how what you're providing is going to give value to them. And it's not about us, right? It's not about the person writing the proposal, even though it feels like it at the time, but it's really not about that. So
yeah, and I think that's a great point, writing about trying to craft your writing from the reader's perspective. And it's really hard to do. I run into this all the time. For example, when I'm writing emails to people, maybe somebody who I think is a prospect or somebody who's interested in our services. And I'm like, we can do this. Yes. And we do this and we can provide this. And then I stop and then I go back and reread my email. And then I have to, recraft some of the things written from their perspective. Like, we know your schedules are tight, so we can help with such and such. Because your material is so complex, we have technical editors who have a specialty in that field. Or I have to be really thoughtful about how to make the content address their needs up front, rather than just talking about, oh, we do this, we do this, we do this.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I don't think it's not necessarily natural to think about our writing that way. It's something we really have to work at and do thoughtfully.
Yeah, I find the same thing. I'll be working on a proposal. I'm like, I teach this. How am I not doing this better?
I know.
It is
I know.
Crazy. So, for all of you listening out there, we all struggle with it. It's a hard thing to do. And it takes that, like you said, kind of that conscious effort to stop and really think about it from their perspective. And, when you're in the throes of a proposal and there's deadlines and all of that, I know it's hard. And I always tell people, pick your battles, like find those sections that are highest on the evaluation criteria and really focus on it there. But, and certainly at the beginning. So great feedback. One more question here. Let's say someone is preparing a proposal right now. They've got it on their plate. It's almost ready to go. And they're listening to this and they're going, oh, crap. There's so much that I want to go back and fix, but they don't have a lot of time. What's one thing you think people can go back and make a big impact with, but they can do quickly?
Sure. I would say one thing you could do very easily, very quickly is make things smaller. So keep all your same content, break longer sentences into shorter sentences, break one long paragraph into 2 paragraphs. Between your different sections, add meaningful subheads if those aren't there already. You can just literally get more white space on the page. And you can do that just by literally hitting a return, more returns, another return, another return.
Yeah.
That's going to instantly make your proposal more pleasant to read, more accessible to the reader, and increase your readability scores.
Beautiful. I love that idea. And don't get caught up in, oh my gosh, where does that perfect paragraph break have to be? Or this paragraph really belongs together. Don't get caught up in that. The person needs to read it.
Yeah.
So just go, go, go.
Yeah.
Samantha, this has been fantastic as always. You always have amazing content for anything that I hear from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Lisa, before we get off, I want to hear about your new book.
Oh, thank you. Yep, I have a new book out called Dare to be Influential. So it's not necessarily written about RFP specifically, but it's all about how to be more influential by being who you are. And it actually flows into RFPs to a lot of degree from a company's perspective. You've got to really stand in who you are and know what you are in order to be truly responding from a place of authenticity. So that's what the book is all about.
Cool. Yeah, I would love to read that. I've been doing a lot of work in the same vein, at least what I suspect is in the same vein myself, which kind of like, how can you step into your own shoes and be as, I guess, in your words, as influential as you actually are without feeling like, oh, I'm being, bossy, or I'm trying to get all the attention for myself, or I'm being a braggart, kind of all these things that we're taught about, just kind of like stay in the corner, do your job, don't draw attention to yourself. That's kind of all the stuff that I've been thinking about working with recently.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it's so true. I am definitely not one to stand in a corner and shy away. But I think that, if you're putting yourself out there and you're not being true to who you are, then that's when that spotlight really gets shown on you. And if you're standing in your own power and you've planted your flag in who you are and you know who you are, that's what people are going to be drawn to. And that's when you can make a huge positive impact on the world. And I say positive because, of course, you could do negative things with that, but we all want the positive, right? We don't want that. So
cool. Well, I look forward to reading it. I'm going to get on. Is it on Amazon?
It is on Amazon. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Well, thank you. Let me know what you think. Oh, an editor reading my book. That's always good.
I will not bring an editor's eye. I will only bring somebody who is interested in the content. No worries.
I love that. Well, this is wonderful. Y'all, we will have information about Samantha in the show notes so you can get in touch with her if you need writing help or anything like that. She's fantastic. And she also puts out a lot of good, really helpful information. And it's probably on your website somewhere. So definitely look her up. She's fantastic. And thank you again for being here.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, you've been listening to the RFP Success Show, where we bring you tips and strategies for up-leveling your RFP responses. And do you want to know the true cost of losing an RFP? Check out our new ROI calculator on rfproi.com. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you here again next time.